Hello, and welcome to another Todd Talk, where we take teaching theory and turn it into teaching practice. So, over the course of the next few Todd Talks, we're going to be talking about ways that you can challenge gifted students in the regular ed classroom. The way that gifted works is there are some gifted students that receive direct services, and these services are provided by a gifted intervention specialist who is someone who's been trained and has the skills to challenge these students at their high cognitive ability. However, most gifted students are not in this direct service. They're in the regular classroom with students and a teacher that may not have had the training to challenge these kids. It may come naturally to them, or they may be skilled at doing that. But there's very little in teacher training that talks about how to challenge high ability kids and how to challenge gifted kids. And so what I'm going to be providing is some strategies. Some are simple, some are more complex, some are low impact, some are high impact. But the idea here is that these are strategies that you could include in your classroom so that the students who are gifted in your classroom, or even the students who just like to challenge themselves, they don't necessarily need to be gifted, can be challenged. And so the first of these that I'm going to talk about today is what are called bulletin board challenges. So in our classrooms, we have bulletin boards around that we put pretty stuff on and sayings and quotes and whatever. But what if you use the bulletin boards to challenge students? So this is what I did in my classroom. Is I had bulletin boards all over the classroom that had various challenge activities that students could enter into. I never made this a requirement. I made this an option. So if students finished early, they knew that they could take part in one of these. And some of these bulletin board challenges were really quick. Some were more involved, but it wasn't tied to curriculum. It was just trying to jumpstart the thinking of these students and to challenge their cognitive abilities. And so the first one I'm going to be talking about is what I call useless trivia. So useless trivia is just like it sounds. So I would ask a trivia question, something you might see in Trivial Pursuit or something that you might hear on Jeopardy. And I would pose that question. And I pose these every week. I had one a week. And so what it allowed students to do is to challenge themselves to figure this out. And so students could research this, students could try to figure it out on their own, students could ask people. But the idea here is that it's just a simple, low-level trivia question that they're just finding more information about and being able to answer that. And it gets them thinking about things. So let me show you some examples of what this looks like. So what did useless trivia look like in my classroom? I was a fifth and sixth grade social studies teacher. So a lot of times I wanted this to reflect, the subject area that I was teaching. So history and geography and all these things. And that way students could see how history manifests itself in the real world. I wanted them to see that connection. And I also wanted to spark their thinking, but it wasn't always about social studies. So I did a lot of other subject areas too. I would ask math questions, or I would ask science questions, and so on and so forth. And I would always try to mix them. And I'll show you some examples. So for instance, these next few questions are ones that were very timely. I asked at a specific time. So this one was around the beginning of November. Why is Veterans Day celebrated on November 11th? And the idea just here was they could look it up and find it out really easily, that it was the day that we signed a treaty to end World War I. But it also might make them curious to learn, what is World War I? What treaty was signed? Who was involved with it? What were the ramifications of this treaty? So it just gives them cause to look at something and maybe get interested and look at it further, to explore it further. So sure, they might just get the answer, the easy answer, but then that answer might kind of kickstart them into thinking about something else. Here's another holiday one that's actually math related. So how many presents are in the 12 days of Christmas? So in the song 12 Days of Christmas, there are all these presents that are given. If someone received all these presents, how many would they be? So students would have to break that down, and they would figure out that it was 364 presents by doing all that math. I tried to make them more culturally as well. So rather than just have the most common holidays, we looked at things like, so in May, I would pose this question: what does Cinco de Mayo commemorate? Because a lot of students think, oh, it just means that we get to go to a Mexican restaurant and get half off of our bill. But Cinco de Mayo is very important to Mexican people. And so why is it celebrated? And so I wanted them to look it up, that it's Mexico's victory over France in the Battle of Puebla, 1862. And again, the piece of trivia is not the main idea here. The main idea is getting you thinking about why we have this holiday in the first place. So why do we celebrate it? Why is it celebrated here in the United States? That would be a really interesting question. So some of them are geography questions, like what is the only U.S. state to border one other state? And so students would pull out a map and actually have to look at a map to figure this out. And so they would find out that it was Maine because they could see it on the map. But again, this is getting them thinking about how we use social studies in the real world. What does that look like? Here's one I always post around Thanksgiving time. The eagle is the national bird of the United States. What bird did Benjamin Franklin suggest should have been the one to represent our country? And the answer is a turkey. And so what this does is it kind of sparks another question, which is like, would we be eating turkey on Thanksgiving if it was our national bird? We don't eat eagle anytime. So, and we hold these eagles into high esteem. They're protected, and yet we raise turkeys and kill them at an alarming rate in order to make turkey sandwiches and turkey drumsticks and whatever. So would we do that had that decision gone through, if Ben Franklin had actually, his suggestion had been taken? Sometimes it's not even social studies related. So this is a science one. But again, I'm trying to get them to think about something. So like laser, we see the word laser all the time. We know what a laser means, but do we know that it's an acronym that actually stands for light amplification by stimulated emissions of radiation? A lot of students don't know that. And so it gets them, oh, okay, that's why that's called that. So that one's and it might make them curious about learning about other words that they don't know are acronyms, but actually are. So this one it's just an interesting trivia question. It has nothing to do with history necessarily, but statistics. What percentage of children are born on their actual due date? So when a pregnant woman is given her due date, how often is that child actually born on that date that the doctor predicts? And it's really low. It's only 5%. And so it raises other questions like, well, we can't count on that due date then. How often are they early? How often are they late? So on and so forth. So it leads to all sorts of interesting questions. This one, I try to mix things that they're interested in with history as well. So what is the oldest known sports stadium? So a lot of kids are interested in sports, but they don't know what the oldest known sports stadium is. And it would be Olympia in Peloponnese, Rome, 776 BC. No matter how you decide to do your useless trivia, make it fun. So I tried to have fun questions, but also they were designed to spark the thinking of students, like get them thinking. So by researching this and finding the answer, hopefully it would open up a rabbit hole to somewhere else where they could explore and they could kind of take that further. And so that's kind of what the idea of the useless, the answers themselves are lower level, but it's the process of finding the answers where the higher level challenge is taking place. The second option that I provided for students are just what I termed brain teasers. And these were activities, worksheets that engage the brain, cause kids to be thinking about something, to jumpstart their thinking. Sometimes I would use these as bell ringers before class just to kind of get the juices flowing. Other times they were just at the back of the room for students to work on should they want to. And so when students would finish doing their regular work, they could go back and grab one of those and work on that at their own leisure. Sometimes I attached like prizes to them, like if they got all 10 riddles correct, I would give them a candy bar or something. But the idea here is that you're just engaging the thinking process of students. So I had all sorts of different types of brain teasers for students to do. For example, here's one where students had to take these boxes and figure out what kind of famous or popular saying was being said there. So if you look at the very first one in the upper left-hand corner, it's head and heels is below it. So it's actually would be head over heels. And it'd have to be like a saying that was known. So for instance, the history one where it's history, 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 some students would say, well, let's try history. And I would say that's not really a saying. So they have to rethink that. And it actually was history repeats itself. And you had other ones like you have update, which is down on the left hand middle way. You have Tuesday, which is that one in the middle. One of my favorites is that one in the upper in the middle, where it has issue in a box, all these issues. And so when students would work on this one, they'd be like many issues, or issues in a box, or tissue box, or something of that nature. And then when I would reveal to them that it was tennis shoes, there would be this aha moment, because there are 10 issues within this box, and so it's tennis shoes. Another one I would use is Sudoku, especially if I was teaching a math class. Sudoku is a very simple thing to teach. It doesn't take a lot of time to teach it, but it's something that students can use the rest of their lives. And so the basic premise of Sudoku, I'm not going to go into great detail, but is that there are 9 boxes within a grid. Each of those grids have 9 boxes within. In them, you have to put each number from 1 through 9 once. You can't repeat it within the 9 square grid. And you can't have the same number in a row or a column. So basically, there's only one correct answer that goes in each of these boxes. And you have to use logic to try to figure that out. And so I would start with simple 4 grid Sudokus if I was introducing it to students or with younger students. And then eventually, there are lots of free resources online that you can look up Sudoku, and it gives you easy puzzles, medium puzzles, difficult puzzles, depending upon the skill set of your students. And you can have all 3 options, and then students choose for themselves which one they want to do. I like to use riddles with students. So you see riddles here, like number 2 is in a calendar. Some months have 30 days and some months have 31 days. How many months have 28 days? And of course, the answer is 12, because every month has 28 days to it. It doesn't say how many end with 28 days. Another one here it kind of tries to trick you a little bit, but to get you thinking. So when you look at number 6, why are $1990 bills worth more than $1989 bills? Your mind naturally goes to a year. But in actuality, this is asking, why are $1,990 bills worth more than $1,989 bills? Because it's $1 more. And so getting students to kind of think a little deeper. And one of my favorites is number 7. James and Charles were born on the same day and year to the same parents, yet are not twins. How is this possible? So students would rack their brain about all sorts of possibilities involving the lunar year or leap year or alternate realities. And then I would have to explain to them it's just because they're triplets, and they omitted the third person's name. And so, and again, it's very simple answer, but it really gets them thinking about those things. The third bulletin board enrichment that you can have for your students is a book club. And I know most people think of book club as being very interactive, very hands-on, but you can make your book club as involved or not involved as you want. So the way that I ran my book club in my class is every month I would simply put up a title of a book that to challenge students to read in that month. And if they read it, then they would get some privilege, like they could have lunch with me or whatever. And then I would have another book the next month. And some students would say, that book sounds interesting, I'm going to read that one. And some students would not. And I also had a further challenge that if they read all 9 books from the 9 months that we were in school, that they would, like, I would take them to the movie or something like that. So I would always have some prize attached to that. Although I feel like a lot of students read not because of the prize, but because it was something that they were interested in. And I had readers in the classroom. They were just looking for another perspective. So here's an example of what my book club might look like. So I had, again, these are 5th and 6th graders that I had in my class. So I tried to make the books somewhat age appropriate, but at the same time, I'll talk about in a little bit, I wanted to have books that would challenge them. So it was kind of a mix. So sometimes these were books that I had read and was interested in having them read. Sometimes there were books that I hadn't read. And so I was challenging myself to read the books as well. So you can see here in August, September, if the kids read The Red Pyramid by Rick Riordan, they would get popcorn. So I also, like I said, I always had a prize that just to reward them, not to get them to read, but just to say, hey, I value the fact that you read this, even though you didn't have to. And then I had books. You can see I had kind of classic books like 10 Little Indians by Agatha Christie or Adventures of Sherlock Holmes by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. But I had more recent ones like The Book Thief and the Mysterious Benedict Society. So I tried to have a mix of books that would be of interest. Now you notice that there's a couple in here that are history related, but most of them are not. Like The Book Thief is history related and The Year of the Hangman is history related. But otherwise, I just tried to pick high interest books. And then I also gave students the option, if they, because I didn't make the list this, in other words, I didn't have like February's book planned out in August. I added a book every month, and this just happens to be the collection of what we did over the course of the year. But I would take suggestions from students as well. And so I wanted to provide a place for them to do that. So what I would do is I would give them this form, and they would put their name, the book that they were recommending, and then give me a reason why. And if they gave me a compelling reason, I would use their book for the book of the month. And we were never getting together to talk about these books. They were not taking AR quizzes on them. It was not part of our curriculum. I was not a language arts teacher. It was just trying to get kids interested in reading. So either taking kids who are already interested in reading and giving them some other options, or trying to get kids who do not read to find interesting books. Because I would have the book and I would have a little write-up on it and what made the book kind of interesting. And that way, hopefully that would entice them to want to try reading these books. One of the challenges of recommending books for kids is that you have this fine balance where you want to challenge them to read above grade level, but at the same time, you don't want them reading something that would not be appropriate for their age. So, for example, I think The Hunger Games is a really high interest, really well written book, but it's about kids killing other kids. So, do you want a third or a fourth grader reading that? And so, the challenge for gifted students has always been finding them age appropriate books that will challenge them. And so to help with that, what we have here is, you see this link here. This is a link to Mensa's Kids for Excellence in Reading program, where Mensa, the organization, puts together a book list for certain grade levels of good books to read that would be age appropriate and would also be challenging. And so this is very helpful in that it allows you to have a list to work from. So for example, this list that you see right here, has a good mix of books like Harriet the Spy and The Jungle Book and Matilda. And so you could give this to 4th to 6th graders and feel confident that this is going to be a book that challenges the student, but is not going to be inappropriate. Esperanza Rising is a really good multicultural one that you could have students read. But so this can give you somewhere to go when you're creating your book list. For the book of the month, like where do you get ideas from? You can use something like this. Here's another example from the Mensa site where for 7th and 8th graders, where they, things such as Across 5 Aprils, The Call of the Wild, The Giver. You notice that there is a good mix of older books. And you may say, well, I don't want to have them read older books because those books are kind of dated. But at the same time, those older books will still challenge their reading, but still be age appropriate. Because a lot of those older books don't have some of those risque things that more modern books might have. So I did always like to use classics for that very reason, because I could guarantee that it was probably age appropriate, but it's still going to be a challenge. And then there's the extra added challenge of reading a book that's maybe 100 years old and trying to make sense of some of the things that have changed since then. So I do like to use, like you see on this list, Frankenstein and The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, and those are Johnny Tremaine. Those are classic books that you can guarantee that students are going to be challenged by. A fourth strategy that you could use would be for in-class and extra enrichment would have a problem of the week. So the problems of the week should not just be like a simple trivia answer that kids could look up online, but it should be kind of a rich question that requires them to think. So for instance, I have this question right here, which is, when my father was 31, I was 8. Now he's twice as old as me. How old am I? And so students would have to try to figure that out. It would take them some time, and they would have to really think about it. So you could have, if you're a math teacher or you teach math in your classroom, you could have all sorts of math problems. I've included here a link to the math counts. They have a problem of the week archive where they have all sorts of problems of the weeks that you can just set in the back of your room, and again give that as an opportunity for students to work on. It's not for extra credit, it's not for a grade, it's just an opportunity to to enrich themselves. Another example would be Stories with Holes by Nathan Levy. These are general story problems where you have a story that's missing something, and then students have to try to figure out what is missing. So, for example, here is a story with holes called The Masked Man. And the story says the man was afraid to go home because the man with the mask was there. And so students would try to figure out, was someone trying to rob their home or whatever. And then you get a more logical answer, as you see there at the bottom, is that the man with the mask was a catcher. And the person was the runner heading for home, and they didn't want to be out, so they wanted to avoid them. So that's just one example. There are several examples of Stories with Holes. He's got several volumes of them, and those are a good way to challenge cognitively students to think. A fifth idea would be to have a current events bulletin board, and this can be really simple. As you see in this picture here, all this person has done is taken stories, printed them up, and put them on the board. So there are some activities for kids to do underneath them should they choose to do that. But the idea here is that kids are just exposed to maybe some news that they normally wouldn't. Another way it can look is like you see right here, which is a little more interactive. So here, the teacher has linked stories with specific parts in the world. So what you're seeing is not only or in this case, the United States, but not only are you seeing these events, but you're seeing where they take place. So you get some context of where this is happening, and that it's not just specific to your particular area, but there are things going on around the country that you should be aware of. This is another way that you could do current events. So on a bulletin board, I would simply put a list of 10 terms that I pulled from the news, and things that were going on in the world. And I asked students, if they chose to do this, to not only identify the person, place, or thing, but what is the significance of it? So, for example, you might know that the CDC is the Center for Disease Control, but why is it in the news lately? What has it been doing that causes it to be current events? You might know that Nigeria is a country in Africa, but why is Nigeria what is going on there that would cause there to be, focused on this particular country? You might look at the word like perseverance at the very bottom, and you may say, well, perseverance, but it actually is the name of the Mars rover that was launched. And so you would, again, have to identify this person, place, or thing in the context of what is going on in the world. And so I like this because it helped kids to see the world rather than just the 5 feet that are directly in front of them or behind them. And it allowed them to see how, things going on in the world can affect others as well. So there you have it. There are 5 ideas for things that you can put in your class that have high impact on student enrichment, but low impact on actually affecting your class day-to-day activities. There are lots of resources here. There are also resources located at my website, which is www.thegiftedguy.com. Under the resources page, I have some puzzle packs that you can use. I have projects that could be used for Four Corners. So feel free. Those are all free resources. Feel free to try those.